We started out with some coffee talk about what projects Dave and I have taken on this week. Also, Dave takes some time out and tells us what's selling in January. Then, Seeders and Drills, old versus new, some interesting high-tech farm videos available to everyone. And finally, hired help that can work all day, all night, and save you 40% on your water bill. I'm Grant Nelson. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast with Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. And before we went on the air, we basically diagrammed this out like Sandlot football, and we get on the air, and it's just generally a conversation between Dave and I, and we talk about some of the things we always talked about even when we were both younger, and we used to send letters back and forth to each other. So, Dave, first off, I want to just greet you and say good morning and ask how you're doing.
Morning. Oh, I'm doing fine. We're having nice weather. We've had a lot of frost on the trees and stuff, so it's real pretty outside. And sounds like we're preparing for some actual winter here in about a week or less, 4 or 5 days. So it's going to give us a little taste of winter anyway. I don't know how bad, but, we're supposed to have some sub-zero highs coming up, so.
Well, it seems like what you get out in Carrington, North Dakota, we get out here around Thief River Falls, Minnesota, just a few hours later is what it always seems like to me. And I've said before, we've gotten off pretty scot-free this winter, and now I think we're probably going to get what we've got coming here in the next few days. Dave, what do you got going on out there? We're both builders. We're not engineers. I've always said, when I build, I put in an extra nail or an extra screw because I'm not an engineer, but usually the projects turn out pretty good. What have you got going out there in Carrington?
Well, today I have a project to build something that's supposed to hold something up, and it's supposed to be made out of a dowel and a square block and a round disc.
Sounds like you got general specifics.
Yes, I sure do. And I haven't got a picture of it yet, but I kind of have a picture in my mind of what it's going to turn out like. So hopefully I hope it looks like it's supposed to when I'm done.
I do some of my best work about 4 o'clock on a Sunday after I realize that I've kind of wasted my whole day. When I'm under the gun, I get out there and get after it, and I'm amazed at how much I can get done in an hour and a half. But over the weekend myself, now I found I don't know if it's a horse evener, a wooden one, or if it's an old trailer axle. But I found it a long time ago. And so what I'm working on is making that into a light for the area above our kitchen island. So I brought that into town today and power washed it because I thought it had just a little bit too much patina on it. And I didn't want that patina slowly flaking off into our food or anything like that. So I power washed that. But that evener or trailer axle or whatever it was, for certain was used by Clifford Lindquist, fellow who had the farm long before I did. And I think, Dave, that, I always consider that since Dad used to haul oat shocks over at Clifford's farm way back when, who knows, maybe Dad even used it,
Could very well be.
Because our dad used to work for Clifford Lindquist, who owned the farm before I purchased it. And Dad even used to keep his horses in my barn, so that always makes me feel kind of good. I feel, Dave, like I'm going around and collecting all these little pieces of personal history or little mementos that kind of bring me back to a certain place. Now, about 20 years ago, I had a whole bunch of utility poles that I had cut up rough cut at the sawmill guy down in Red Lake Falls. And these were nice boards. They were very heavy. They're only inch thick, but they've been sitting inside a shop for about 20 years, and I finally started using them on some little projects inside the house. Now, right now I'm taking that rough cut wood up in my little studio office, and I'm putting them on the wall and just kind of putting them so they match, so they butt up nicely, and kind of covering a portion of the wall. And then I made a shelf, and what I'm hoping to do is put some little tractors, like an M. I think I'll put an M on there, see if I can find an M with a farmhand loader on it, a couple other things like that. So I'm slowly using all my little resources to put something together out there, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. Take that stuff. Mary had me build a shelf for some of my stuff like that. And actually it's two of them. And it's made out of black pipe fittings and flanges and mounted to the wall. And then we had to take a new board and make it look used. And that's the shelf. And it turned out real cool.
I bet it did. You know, this is the portion of the show we call Coffee Talk, and I just took a nice big drink. But Dave, let's talk a little bit about High Plains Equipment, where you work. How's equipment selling out there? Are farmers still in the market, or are they holding off, or what's going on?
Well, this is typically kind of a slow time after the first of the year because, you know, many of their purchases are driven by tax issues and so on, and they want to do something before the end of the year. So kind of a slow time getting together things lined up for assembling the new machinery that will be coming in. And there's some stuff trickling out, but typically it's pretty slow right now.
Well, one of the things that people like to buy about this time of year, I think, are seeders and drills. So we're going to take a little break right now. We'll do my online column. We'll come back. We're going to talk about seeders and drills, and we're going to talk a little bit more about autonomous equipment. That seems to be a subject, Dave, that just brings itself into our conversation every week. So let's take a break, do the online column. We'll be back with more. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Now, there's always been a need for personal history or nostalgia. I'm going to use a description I found on the internet. Nostalgia is commonly described in the marketing literature as a preference, general liking, positive attitude, or favorable effect towards objects such as people, places, or things that were more common or popular, fashionable, or widely circulated when one was younger, like in early adulthood, in adolescence, or in childhood. Now, we may not like something from our past because it was better, but we were better, at least physically, as we were younger. The vintage snowmobile hobby has been strong for several years now and only seems to gain strength. There's been several shows and races based on vintage snowmobiles that claim a decade or decades old history. Something new, something old showed up on my radar last week, and I want to tell you about it. The new event is called the I-500 Challenge Ride, based on the route of the old Winnipeg to St. Paul I-500 snowmobile race. At this point, the ride's a father-son event, which involves Roger Cram and Wyatt Cram. Now, 3 years ago, Roger told his son, Wyatt, that his bucket list included completing the I-500 Winnipeg to St. Paul route on his 1973 John Deere 400. The ride is scheduled to begin January 24th, 2022 in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and finish January 29th in Elk River, Minnesota at the Midwest Ride-In event. Now, the Ride-In event is billed as the world's biggest family-friendly vintage snowmobile get-together and will celebrate 50 years since John Deere's entry into the snowmobile market at their 2022 get-together. I've told you about my own affinity for old snowmobiles. Previously, it was a full-blown infatuation, which ended in burnout and then a final sell-off. I think my whole experience was a connection to times past. The older I become, the greater my realization is that most of what humans do is to create or maintain connection. We have social gatherings to connect with friends. We have reunions to connect to family, and church to connect with God. Maybe this I-500 Challenge Ride is a series of connections. The father's connections to his past, the son's connection to his father, and a shared connection to an area of the country where 20 below and snow must be viewed not as an impediment, but rather a playground. Wyatt Cram is from Fargo, and he and I have communicated back and forth about his impending challenge. He'll join his father on a John Deere 402. The snowmobiles used in this trip will be stock, except for the addition of hand warmers, along with better carburetor and clutch components. It's still a year off, but that gives Wyatt and Roger time to get their John Deere snowmobiles ready and to physically prepare for the trip. They're also seeking sponsorships for their ride, which will include a route that passes through Thief River Falls. If you'd like to get involved with a sponsorship, you can check their website at i-500challenge.com. When the time comes, I plan to get some drone and video footage of the pair as they make a trip through northern Minnesota and back in time. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. It's Dave Nelson in Carrington. He's the one with all the knowledge. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios at Thief River Falls Radio. I just basically stitch it all together. Dave, before we took a break, you're talking about seeders and drills. That seems to be kind of a popular thing to buy this time of the year, isn't it, when people make purchases?
Well, and a lot of it's already purchased, okay, but it's the time of year when they're going to get the new stuff that is being built over the winter for them. So it is definitely a popular time for that. We have clinics coming up for planters and air drills and that kind of thing for the customers. And it is the time of year to think about that kind of stuff, that's for sure.
You know, we were talking before we got on the air today about a 90-foot, 36-row drill. You know, I can't fashion how that would even get in some of the fields that we used to farm back when we were kids.
No, it probably wouldn't. And actually, an example of what you can do with that, it's in a 1,200-acre field. I believe every round is like 42 or 47 acres. And there are several people that have two sections of land together and put into a big field around this area. So that is amazing because our 20-acre chunks of land that we had at home, it wouldn't even be one round on one of these big fields, and you'd be done with it in a half round. So, yeah, it's amazing what productivity you can get out of this big stuff. I was raised on a two-row corn planter, and my first job was I rode on the seat of it and lifted the openers out of the ground when it got to the end of the field. And 2 rows at a time, it took a long, long, long time to plant. And, there was always a spare bag of corn hanging on the planter so you could stop and fill and refill because the hoppers were small and stuff. So, yeah, it's an amazing difference between what we did then with a two-row corn planter and a 10-foot wide drill and now, 90-foot wide corn planter, and a lot of the drills are getting up into the, 60 and 70 feet, are pretty popular now. So it's pretty wild what goes on and what they can do in a day with this new machinery.
I'm starting to understand why they want those huge seed carts. What did we talk about a couple of weeks ago? 1,000-bushel seed cart? Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah. That's kind of gotten to be the big, the big hopper now for a seed cart for a drill is this 950 to 1,000 bushels.
Those old end wheel drills, I see those for sale every once in a while, and I'm guessing they're probably worth more right now than they were back then because people like to use them for plot seeders for deer plots.
Yeah, a lot of them got tucked away in a closet somewhere and haven't seen the light of day for many years, but we had one, and I remember fixing the chains on the back of it because the covering chains would break or hook on something or wear through because they were dragging in the sand, And that was a interesting setup. But one nice thing is you had your wheel mark out there at the end past the drill, so you could turn around and put that wheel right back in the mark again, and you didn't need a marker or anything. You just keep that wheel in the track, and away you go.
You know, nowadays, of course, we're getting not only more about RTK and GPS, but we're also talking about autonomous. I was just checking out a story about the 360 Yield Center, where they're now using an autonomous irrigation unit. And it just goes slowly up and down the rows of corn or beans or whatever you want. And it has a pipe that drags alongside the row, so it applies water very accurately. They're using 40% less water than a center pivot. This is their claim. And also in 2020, they saw a 65 bushel response in corn and 14.5 bushel response in soybeans to using the 360 rain system. Two things. That's amazing. That's an incredible reduction in water usage. But the idea that, you know, they can just autonomously let this unit run up and down the field, and it doesn't go very fast, and then water their plants as they go. It's amazing to think that how far we've come. I mean, from those end wheel drills and whatnot to now a machine that just goes up and down the field by itself.
I know that. I'm going to have to study up on that one a little bit because that sounds really cool. You know, we're used to center pivot sprinklers, you know, and that. And, of course, there's a lot of water that doesn't get directed exactly where it needs to go there. And, you know, they're round, these pivots. So in a square field, there's areas that don't get watered, and then there's areas that get watered, and the road gets hit a little bit some places, you know. So it's a great concept. I hope it works practically.
Yeah, I hope so too. They've had several units go out. They seem to be planning on more and probably doing much more, they said, by 2023. One more thing before I let you go, I had to tell you about DigiKey Electronics provides electronic parts to a lot of people, and they put a series out called Farm Different. And this is based on a lot of their consumers of their products who are doing different things with farm operations. A lot of what they're doing is spraying out in the field with units, and of course they're gathering data using GPS and RTK. And one of the things that we found out this July, now this was not on the video, but in July, Rantizo out of Iowa got the capability to run more than one drone with one operator. They call it swarm capability, and that allows them to apply 40 acres an hour or 400 acres a day using their swarm technology. DigiKey's video, the first one I saw, was more about smaller plots like nut trees, that sort of thing, using the spray technology. But next month, they're going to have a new video, and that will be based on the Grand Farm near Fargo, Dave. That should be an interesting one.
I bet that will be.
Anyway, you could get us in there, Dave. We can take a tour.
I can certainly try. I don't know what they'll do, but I can sure give it a try. It'll be fun to go there.
Well, use whatever clout you can, and make sure you bring your little brother. You got anything else for us this week, Dave?
I guess not. I'm just going to enjoy the first few nice days and then hunker down for the cold that's coming.
That sounds good. Well, we'll find out all about it next week. Thanks a lot, Dave. You have a great day, and tell everyone hello out there.
All right. Bye, Grant.
Bye-bye. There he is, my brother, Dave Nelson, out in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. And this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.